Good evening and welcome to Northbeat. I'm Shannon Scott. We begin our show tonight in Hay River, Northwest Territories, where the sentencing hearing for James Colosimo is underway. Colosimo pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the death of an 18-year-old woman back in 2020. Now he's in front of a judge waiting to learn just how long he'll have to spend behind bars. The CBC's Carla Ulrich is in Hay River tonight and she joins us live. Carla, you were in the courtroom today. Tell us what happened.
Well, Colosimo was in attendance, and so were his parents and siblings. We heard that Colosimo met May Kruger through work, and they briefly dated. Kruger was hoping to end their relationship for good the night that he came over, and that the knife Colosimo used to stab Kruger was brought to the home by him. Colosimo's lawyer said he had alcohol, cocaine, and pills in his system, and that an entity told him to kill her.
So, Carla, you mentioned there that Colosimo's family and friends were in the court. I understand the victim's family and friends were there too. What did they have to say?
Yes, the victim's family packed the seats on their side of the courtroom. They were emotional while they read their statements. They talked about the young life he took away and how special Kruger was to them. One sister called her their beloved angel. Her best friend said she deserved the world. One main theme was the deep sense of fear and loss they all still live in since the murder.
So, Carla, tomorrow is the last day of this hearing. What can we expect to happen tomorrow?
So we should find out how long Colosimo will go to prison. Because a life sentence is automatic for murder, the main thing to be decided at the sentencing is how much time Colosimo must spend behind bars before becoming eligible for parole. The minimum is 10 years and the maximum is 25. Judge Shannon Smallwood is expected to hand down that sentence tomorrow.
All right, Carla, thank you for keeping your eye on this. I'm sure we'll hear from you again tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Shannon.
That was the CBC's Carla Ulrich in Hay River tonight. A Betchico NWT man says he and his family are in dire straits after their income assistance was recently cut off. Christopher Dryneck has been blind since birth. He and his wife are both illiterate and their daughter is disabled. With no food in the house and a 3-month waiting period before he can apply again, Dryneck says he's running out of options. Robert Holden brings us his story.
It makes me sad and I get hurt. I can't, what they're asking, I can't do it because we both can't read and write. And sometimes they tell us to download this on a computer. My wife's not going to go, we don't have a computer, we don't have internet. She's not going to sit down and go on a computer and download this. She can't, it's hard for her to use computer. She can't do that at all.
Dryneck says he isn't completely sure how they got cut off. He was told by NWT Income Assistance he was being investigated for undeclared income for last year, after his wife worked as a janitor a handful of times for the Clecho government. When they tried to remedy the situation, he says the department was unhelpful and didn't understand the gravity of his situation.
I don't know what declare means. Right. I don't know what declare means. They explain to us, but we don't know what it means. We have no education, me and my wife. But they don't help us, they don't explain nothing to us.
Dryneck says his father pulled him out of school in the 3rd grade due to his blindness. His disability makes it difficult to understand his finances.
And now, we're just sitting at home here, 3 of us, in a big home that my mom and dad left me. Don't know what to do. We stop fooling around because we're not getting anywhere or anything. We can't go to Yukon for food bank because when we're not local, that's what they told us. And there's no food banks here in Betchico. There's nothing.
There are many problems.
Janeway Allen Armstrong is MLA for Montfouille. She says Dryneck's situation is very common in Betchico. She says there's not enough programs there for disabilities, saying everything is in Yellowknife. CBC News reached out to Betchico and Clecho chiefs to know more about available help for people like Christopher, but didn't receive a response. When Dryneck can apply in 3 months' time, it might be easier. The Income Assistance Office says they'll improve the program for people with disabilities this summer. The department told CBC News users will require less paperwork and will be able to apply on an annual basis. Robert Holden, CBC News, Yellowknife.
An update now to a story we brought you last night. One of the 2 missing travelers between Cambridge Bay and Kuluktuk has not been found. Search and Rescue Coordinator Angulalak Peterson told CBC yesterday that both men had been found, and we told you that on our show. Peterson reached out later last night to say one of the two people is still missing. He says crews have been searching by ground and by air for the last 12 days. He says they're now tracking the missing man's footprints. Nunavut's MP is urging Inuit Taparit Kanatami to work with the National Council for Reconciliation. Under a new law, ITK can appoint a member to a reconciliation oversight body, which will report to Parliament. But ITK President Nathan Obed says he might turn down the opportunity. He says he doesn't want the organization to be part of, quote, a melting pot of Indigenous voices. Lori Idlout hopes ITK will think twice about that.
I think that because of how inclusive the board will be, it is quite a short-sighted view to think that the way the Indigenous peoples are being homogenized is a completely incorrect interpretation.
The council will have as many as 13 directors. 2/3 of them must be Indigenous, and at least 2 must be from Yukon, Northwest Territories, or Nunavut. The public comment period has closed on the cleanup plan for the Faro mine site. The Yukon mine was abandoned in 1998, and the Liard First Nation says remediation won't fix the damage done to its people. Gabrielle Plonka has more.
The Liard First Nation says that nobody ever asked the Kaska people to approve the mine in Faro, and yet the Kaska people live with the consequences. The abandoned mine site is full of toxic water, and generations of Kaska have learned not to harvest food nearby. The Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Board is building a remediation plan, but the land will never return to its untouched state. Liard First Nation says the unfixable damage warrants recommendations in the plan that would address the harm to Kaska people. In prior reports, the assessment board acknowledged that harm, but said those remedies go beyond its jurisdiction. Liard First Nation says that undermines the chance for real healing. The board will now review those comments before issuing a final decision. Gabrielle Plonka, CBC News, Whitehorse.
This time last year, a number of communities in Alberta were facing evacuations because of wildfires. It was the start of a hectic and destructive season right across the country. This year, Alberta is seeing some precipitation and below average temperatures, and that's helping to curtail massive fires. Travis McEwen now with a look at what the season has been like so far and how people who were forced to run for safety last year are feeling now.
In early May of last year, the skies darkened outside Drayton Valley. Emergency crews blocked roads and highways as the wind blew, stoking flames to rise above the trees. An evacuation order was issued for the town. The county's fire chief remembers the extreme conditions vividly.
50 to 60 kilometer-an-hour winds, extremely hot temperatures in the mid to high 20s, very low relative humidity at night. So basically the temperature stayed hot all day and all night. It didn't cool off in the evenings.
A lot different than the recent weather in much of the province. Precipitation and cooler than normal temperatures.
This change in the weather has also allowed us to reduce the size of certain fire restrictions and completely remove other restrictions or advisories in certain areas.
There are no wildfires categorized as out of control and no wildfires of note. However, in areas with built-up drought conditions, it is still easy for some warm, dry, windy days to raise the wildfire danger level again.
Communities that were threatened by fires last year, they're not immune to it happening again.
Those fire breaks are useful in removing fuel that would be between a wildfire and a community. And so the fact that there is burned area does reduce the amount of fuel that's there. But of course, the forest, the ecosystem does start growing back fairly quickly. We'll start seeing fireweed and some other vegetation that starts to come back. So fire breaks do need to be maintained.
A wild wildfire season last year has come with preparation and different perspectives for this one.
I'm dealing with a lot of people telling me they're preparing their RVs and stuff already this year.
If we do get a large-scale incident again, people know their roles, they understand what they need to do in their roles, and just understanding the whole process of how a large-scale incident works.
I thought you guys did a really good job.
Even though people are prepared, The hope is that more rain in the forecast will dampen wildfires, at least for now. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
It is a highly challenging and potentially heartbreaking aspect of wildfire evacuations, moving large number of farm animals to safety. And last year's extreme weather is prompting farmers in Alberta to prepare for the season ahead. The CBC's Dennis Coveton reports.
After a dry winter and spring, there is plenty of dry grass and wood strewn about the fields and forests of the Peace region. Perfect conditions for a fire to take off.
Last few years have been challenging for us. We've went through fires, we've went through floods up in this part of the world.
And across the province, livestock owners like Gary Smith are putting together plans to keep their animals safe. That includes preparing them for an emergency.
Have your animals used to being moved around, have them used to having people around them if you can. With horses and some of the smaller livestock, sometimes it's very difficult to get them to go where you want them to go because they pick up on the energy and the excitement or crisis of the moment, and they might be a little harder to handle than normal.
The Alberta government recommends that producers also identify safe places to relocate their animals in the event of a wildfire.
Up here in Mackenzie County, we have emergency response plan for the agriculture, for livestock, whether it's horses, cows, pigs, whatever you got. We got the grazing reserve that we can house animals in evacuation purposes.
Alberta Wildfire advises producers to proactively share their plans and information about their animals with each other.
Some of these things can include what type of animals that you have on your farm, what kind of medications that the animals have, and any anything high risk that you might have on your farm.
Smith says keeping a cool head is paramount, especially when animals need to be relocated.
To bring them out of the pasture, do it as you normally would, and pay attention to your stock. They'll tell you a little bit too, so follow along with them and move them into position, and then you can get them in a pens and do what you got to do, sort them out and get them loaded on the trucks.
And if the animals cannot be safely moved in time,
last resort, cut your fences, run them through, and we'll gather them after the fire stopped.
Dennis Coveton, CBC News, Grande Prairie.
Well, U.S. officials are trying to contain a massive outbreak of avian flu in cattle south of the border. And scientists here are warning Canada isn't doing enough to proactively monitor for the virus. Lauren Pelly has more on their calls for action.
South of the border, an unprecedented outbreak of bird flu in dairy cattle keeps growing. More than 30 herds across 9 U.S. states now have confirmed infections, and scientists warn the outbreak is even bigger than it appears. Government tests on processed milk found virus fragments in 1 out of every 5 samples.
The fact that we're finding viral RNA in pasteurized milk doesn't mean that there's virus in the pasteurized milk that's going to make people sick. But it does mean that there was an infected cow contributing to the milk supply.
Officials say there are no reports of this virus in Canadian dairy cattle, but there have been millions of infections among wild and farmed birds across the country, suggesting there's plenty of H5N1 circulating here, too.
CBC News asked federal officials what process is in place to detect any traces of the virus in Canadian milk. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says that's not happening yet. They'll help with testing should H5N1 be detected in Canadian cattle. The agency is also requiring dairy cows imported from the U.S. to be screened for bird flu.
I think we're way behind the virus.
Scientists say Canada needs to be more proactive.
In the absence of a robust national surveillance program, there's no way to know if there is infections here or not.
At the University of Guelph, researchers are taking matters into their own hands. The team started tracking influenza in Ontario wastewater a few months ago to study trends in human infections. Now they're pivoting to see if any H5N1 shows up.
We're seeing very low levels, if any, of influenza right now. So if we should see a sudden spike, then that would certainly get our attention.
The hope is by tracking the virus early, there's a chance Canada could prevent an explosion of cases striking our dairy cattle as well. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Hey, I'm Hillary Bird on the banks of the Mackenzie River and the community of Jean Marie River in the Detroit region of the Northwest Territories. You can see that the ice is starting to move. The Mackenzie has broken up. It broke up on Tuesday. And while the ice is moving, there's actually not very much of it. So 3 years after this community was dealing with a devastating flood, they're now grappling with incredibly low water levels. Coming up tomorrow on the Trailbreaker, we'll be live from Jean Marie River. We'll tell you about what this means for the community, what it means for the leadership, for hunters in the community. We'll also hear about how Jean Marie River is preparing for this year's fire season. All that coming up between 6 and 8 a.m. tomorrow morning on CBC North Radio 1 on the Trailbreaker.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
Vanessa likes gymnastics. She loves soccer. She loves to ride her bike. She loves to stay at the park as long as she can. She shows me every day that she can do anything she puts her mind to. The War Amps is able to provide Vanessa with the devices and support that she needs because of the generosity of the public. Nothing will stop her. Any help that she ever needs is right there because of your generosity.
Thank you.
Everyone listen up.
Bursting with labor.
All these guys 21?
Pro-Palestinian demonstrators continue to gather on campuses of several Canadian universities. Tensions are especially high at McGill University in Montreal, where protesters set up an encampment 6 days ago and have ignored calls to dismantle it. In response, Quebec's premier has asked the police to intervene. Alison Northcott has the details.
Encampment is now in its 6th day, with protesters here demanding that McGill University divest from companies they say have links to Israel. But there was also a counter-protest here, with Jewish groups gathering in front of the university gates. They are against the encampment. They say it should be taken down. They say that it is making Jewish students on campus feel unsafe and feel threatened. There was a strong police presence on campus with officers on horseback, on bikes, and on foot. Lines of police keeping both sides physically separated.
I think it's important that students and everyone know that the Jewish community is not, we're not going to give in to anti-Semitism, and that we're going to stand for our values that we've always stood for peace, for love, for peaceful discord, and for defending our right to exist and our right to self-determination.
It's important to recognize that we're talking about over 35,000 people genocided. This isn't a war, Israel against Hamas, and I'm tired of hearing it framed like that. This is a genocide of Palestinian civilians, of children.
Despite calls from McGill University for the people behind the encampment to leave, it remains here. They have asked for police assistance, but so far police have not moved in to dismantle the camp. Premier François Legault says it's time for the encampment to go.
Everybody in Quebec has to respect laws. And right now, these encampments are illegal. So we have to respect law, and I want to make sure that the police officers make sure that the laws are respected.
But for now, the demonstrators are still here. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
The idea of open banking is being called a game changer for financial tech companies. It will let consumers or businesses share personal and financial information between approved institutions. But advocates say Canada is moving too slowly in rolling it out. Anis Hidari explains.
This Calgary tech company has been listening to open banking talk for years.
We're making some good strides towards it. At the same time, we'd love to see the government, take more of a stance behind it and accelerate this for the sake of Canadians.
Open banking could let Canadians switch banks automatically. It lets consumers move personal data between businesses.
The ability to look at their entire financial picture, provide them with insights that are geared and personalized for them. Those are the types of things that would really help us when we would have open banking in place.
The federal budget said it's coming with money allocated and a regulator named. While there are already slower ways to share banking information, experts say the government making it easier is also safer.
The open banking framework would actually allow them to have access to the same type of services, but know that the service providers have been vetted by the government, that they are bound by certain security requirements.
But the federal budget has no deadlines on this project, and fintechs say we're moving slowly compared to Australia.
Like, why can't we do this? Why can every other Western developed nation do this in months to 2 years max?
The Canadian Bankers Association says it supports moving ahead, but didn't answer if it supported speeding up open banking. Back at Neo Financial, they're still waiting.
At the end of the day, it's consumers that are paying a higher price as a result of slower timelines.
More legislation on open banking is expected in the fall. Anis Haydari, CBC News, Calgary.
Well, people in the Nunavut region of the NWT got a hands-on civics lesson this week as the mace of the NWT Legislative Assembly traveled from community to community. The mace is a symbol of the authority of the Assembly and of its Speaker. It, along with a few MLAs, made appearances this week across the Beaufort Delta. They were in Tuktoyaktuk, Ulahaktuk, Sax Harbor, and Tuktoyaktuk. Today, the mace made the rounds in Inuvik.
Was with the Mace Tour, started 2006 by the former Speaker Paul Delory, and he said, you know, it's really sad that our mace doesn't get out to the people, and that's what we started to do. Lucy's riding has not been able to get it. We've been in Sax and Tuck before, but you know, here it was going, so we were able to get into Ulahaktuk and Paulatuk as well.
Residents were told about the cultural significance of the mace, and they got to see up close just how intricate it is. It has 33 pebbles, one from each of the communities in the NWT. Tuktoyaktuk's Joe Nasagalawak was one of the artists who carved the mace. Today's stop in Inuvik was the official end of the tour. Well, if you're a fan of fiddle music, you might want to think about taking a trip to Whitehorse this summer. The Yukon capital is playing host to the Pan-Northern Youth Fiddle Summit in August. It brings together 100 young musicians from across Nunavut, the Northwest Territories, Yukon, and Northern BC. Darlene Nikignak will be there. She and her husband started the Iqaluit Fiddle Club 30 years ago.
Our children in the sports have a chance to compete with other athletes across the North. And so this is kind of it is the first ever Pan-Northern Youth Fiddle Summit, but we don't have gatherings for music across the North as much. There's been some in the Western Arctic drum festivals and dance festivals, but as far as I know, not really gatherings for artists and musicians. So this is exciting.
The Canadian Grand Masters fiddling competition will be held in the Yukon at the same time. It's the first time that national competition will be held in the North. It will bring 35 of Canada's top fiddlers to the territory. Well, there's a new sport out there getting some Canadians very excited. And while it may not replace hockey as a national obsession, it is growing in popularity. Pippa Reed tells us all about netball.
I grew up in Australia where netball dominated Saturday mornings, but the game hasn't taken off so much here in Canada. However, that could be changing. So how does netball work? Well, it's pretty easy when you get the hang of the basics.
Two teams are made up of 7 players who play different positions. Those positions decide where you're allowed to go on the court. Now, unlike basketball, you can't dribble the ball at all and you have to stay in your zone. You can't run with the ball, and when you get the ball, you have to throw it within 3 seconds. Only 2 designated positions from each team are able to score the goals, and the team with the most goals wins.
Got it? Great!
Amy Matthews is the lead director of Netball Edmonton.
With Netball Edmonton, we have people of all ages and abilities, and we have a lot of players who had never played netball before, and then they joined us, picked it up, loved it, and now they're playing in tournaments and coming to training every week.
At just 17 years old, Uya Kabara plays in Team Alberta's under-19 squad.
I learned netball in Namibia when I was in grade 4. Because I went for tryouts, and then my coach was like, "You're so good." Then I joined the team. I think the best thing of playing netball is to play as a team, to win as a team. That's all.
Savi Senaratne is 71 years old and a former netballer for the Sri Lankan national team. When she moved to Canada in 1980, she says there were few opportunities for her to play netball.
Initially when I started, it was only the ladies playing. Now we have, some of the boys joining us, which is nicer. It's a beautiful game. The youngsters keep me young, right? And they're very good to me. And, I like to run with them, keep up with them. So it's helped me to keep young.
We're super excited to be hosting our first ever tournament here in Edmonton. And we'll be hosting over 7 teams here in May. And there'll be lots of fun and games with that. We'll have socials and then also a fundraiser as well. So yeah, really excited about that.
Well, that's netball in a nutshell. See you on the court.
Pippa Reid, CBC News, Edmonton.
Someday our director Alan is going to come back and you're going to catch me dancing because he'll come back too early. That is Northbeat for tonight. I'm always dancing to the weather music, now you know. That is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, you can visit our website, cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Shannon Scott. NHL playoffs are up next, and it's a must-win for the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Boston tonight. Northbeat will also be on early again tomorrow, this time at 6:30 Eastern, 4:30 Mountain, and 3:30 Yukon time. That is just before the Canucks face off against the Predators. Have a good night. Good luck to the Leaf fans. We'll see you tomorrow.
Scare me.
Look out!
Ain't nobody gonna stop me. We have a new world record.
Oh my God. We're a team. We fight the best we can.
Who cries more, winners or losers?
Cry if you want to cry.
Can heartbreak help break records?
You want to be great? You need to sacrifice.
Do bigger fans have higher blood pressure?
How's your heart rate?
Why do we love rooting for underdogs?
Gotta support the home team.
What makes top dogs go the distance? How far will champions go to win?
I was just curious.
Does it matter if they have nothing to lose?
Is that a yes?
When you get curious, you get CBC.
Thank you for choosing Plan B.
Tell me what I need to do to save my family.
Please enter your date of travel.
I can't do this anymore.
If you could go back, change things, would you do it?
One of these days, we're gonna have to grow up. But today is not that day.
I don't want us to get older either.
Son of a Critch. Watch free on CBC Gem. Q with Tom Power. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.